This has taken my blood, sweat and tears to complete, but here we are. I already know this is probably going to be one of my longest videos. This album has resonated with me so much since it released. On the night it was released, I started writing this video and I wrote about the first one or two songs. And I just had such a mental block, honestly, throughout April and May on how to write this whole video, because listening to this album more after the day it drops and over the weeks and seeing the different readings of it and then seeing more interviews with Jimin and him talking about it, I just didn't know how to compile all these amazing interpretations and knowledge into analysing this album, so it took me a long time. I wanted to do this album justice, basically, because, like I said, it resonated with me. It clicked with me straight away, and there was a certain perspective I was looking at it from, because some of the lyrics I was like, that is a phrase that I've been trying to think of so long, to think of how I felt, and Jimin just did it for me. From the lyrics, its form, the music and its composition, the details and the dances, the visuals and the cinematography and the intertextuality, Face has created a special meaning to me, and having that perspective led me to respect and appreciate this album the more I listen to it. So in this video, I am just going to give my own reading and interpretation of Jimin's debut based off my own thoughts and experiences and any context Jimin has detailed already. This is not meant to be a certain for the album. This is not meant to be this is what it means or what it only means. I have read so many amazing interpretations from other fans and ways to look at this album and change your perspective on it. And ARMY's being a fandom of people from everywhere, you can get so many amazing rich perspectives, and I'm so glad to have the opportunity to read so many online. Perspectives and an idea that just wouldn't cross my mind, but that have expanded my horizon when it comes to viewing this album, which has only made the listening experience richer and definitely continue towards the future. Interpretations and readings are the norm with media and art. It's how people connect and understand the text more. What I'm going to say here is just a reading, how I view this album. It is not fact. It's just more like, with what he said, this has resonated with this perspective that I feel, and I want to explain that. It's what makes interactive media fun, having all these different perspectives with it. This is not a review either, but I might sprinkle in my thoughts on the songs and the comeback in general in some places, as it does add to what I'm saying. Again though, to make it clear, this is no way me disregarding anyone else's interpretations or feelings towards the album, nor is it the only way you can read or interpret Jimin's story or message. Everyone's interpretation and reaction to a piece of art and media is valid, and really it's what Jimin says about his album that's the most important thing. So, without further ado, are you ready to escape? I didn't know how to start this at first, whether I started from the beginning with the announcement of the album or with Set Me Free Part 2's release, but I think it would be best to introduce my argument and then go through the album chronologically, as I think that is the best way to experience the album when listening to it. Clearly, the main part of the album, from Face Off to Set Me Free Part 2, is a story. It's a journey of Jimin's experience, or a story he wants to tell. I think when rectifying this video and talking about it or writing about it, that really became clear to me. I mean, BTS have always talked about when they want their fans to listen to their albums, they want them to listen to it chronologically, which means their placements of their songs on the albums are intentional and they mean something. So I think already having that mindset with previous BTS album releases and other members' releases made me more driven to view this story chronologically. On the morning of the comeback, the first thing I actually watched was his interview on Jimmy Fallon, and by the way, Jimin was absolutely amazing on it. I'm so proud of him, and there were many things that he said that were important, but this is one that stood out to me in particular.
사실 이 앨범은 알고 계실 거라고 생각이 들지만 제 자신을 팬데믹도 겪고 그 상황에서 제가 느꼈던 감정들을 뭔가 순차적으로 되돌아보는 감정을 정리하는 그런 앨범입니다. 그래서 많은 분들께서 그냥 공감해 주실 수 있다면은 저는 기쁘게 받아들일 수 있을 것 같습니다.
And that stuck with me. So listening to the album for the first time and watching the Like Crazy music video, I had this at the back of my mind, and especially listening to the album in order, as Jimin said that as the album looks back at his emotions he felt chronologically in the pandemic, I was extra aware on the progression of the album and how the songs all went together and why they were in that order, the themes they share and where they differ as well. Listening to the album that way just opened the doors to an absolute masterpiece, with Jimin capturing feelings and moments that are so universal to all. The album is a response to the pandemic and its effects, which encapsulates so much. So TLDR, if that's a lot, the album for me is about the pandemic and the experience of going through it and the lockdown and life changing so quickly and how it affects everything around you. Also, the translations for the lyrics for the songs, I have been using the amazing Dulcet Bangtan site on WordPress. I follow them on Twitter because they've been one of the best translators, and I love their translations so much for BTS songs because they pick up on nuances in Korean that many of us would just completely miss out, and it's amazing to learn that and have that insight. But I'm very glad that we have translators like Dulcet who takes time out of their day just to make sure everyone understands the lyrics and also the nuances in Korean, and it makes me appreciate the members' songwriting even more. There are themes of escapism and desperation, numbness and being heartbroken, mourning the loss of something that you never thought you could lose, and the temptation of wanting just to fall into your mind. Also, I did write this in my notes originally, talking about the 2022 Festa dinner and then chapter 2 of BTS, but I kind of found myself not writing about it. I won't be flashing any sort of Festa 22 video clips because I'm not even ready to watch that again, and it's been over a year. That was a very long explanation, but I think it's important to get all these details down so you know what you're getting into with this, and so I make it clear. This is just an interpretation and my perspective. I'm not saying this is what definitely happened. I'm not assuming anything that happened to Jimin at all. Without further ado, let's get started. Face Off is a trap soul song with both writing credit from Jimin and Namjoon. The song is full of anger and spite, with the translations of the lyrics clearly suggesting that someone has wronged Jimin in the past. It's interesting pairing an angry tone and message to a more light and mellow beat, like Jimin is trying to keep control of his emotions and his anger or resentment. I love how he uses his raspy voice in this as well. Break It Down is such a poignant part of the song, and it's what keeps me coming back to it. It's just so different to anything Jimin has done. Same with Get It Out and then Pour It Out, Pour It Down. The repetition of these phrases seem like a chant or mantra, a way to get through the situation, through the anger or resentment or upset without completely using it. Something we could all relate to. Jimin also uses his voice like an instrument here, changing its tone to elevate different meanings in the lyrics and to show the complexity of the situation. I love the little like circus music at the beginning at the song. It feels ironic in a way because it's supposed to be this upbeat music, but it's like muffled in this slower dynamic that just feels a bit haunting in a way, so instantly you know, oh, this is not going to be a massively happy experience. Perhaps it's like a quick allusion to the fun times before the pandemic started and the lockdown started, which is now just a distant memory. I also love the use of layering and a little bit of auto-tuning on his voice in the song. It amplifies the anger and draws attention to the certain lyrics of that moment. There's just so much detail in this first song which makes it feel like a painting with so many deep, rich layers. I know the main reading of this, and from what I've seen from other people, is that Jimin is talking about someone who wrongs him, which is completely valid as I read that at first too. But I challenge you to view the you as just not towards a person but rather the pandemic as well. Perhaps what Jimin is angry in this song is not a physical person but rather the pandemic itself, personifying it as a catalyst for all the anger and pain. The lyrics say it is the beginning of an awful nightmare, and looking at that lyric with hindsight, the start of the pandemic was the beginning of an awful nightmare. As kind of surface level as it sounds, it's true. It's a nightmarish scenario, a global pandemic that you only see in disaster movies, but it's now reality. Of course there's going to be so much anger and pain. No one knew how long or how devastating it would be at that time, and looking back on it in hindsight, calling it an awful nightmare just puts it simply right. Also, knowing the context of this, and this isn't something I'm going to be mentioning a lot, BTS literally just came back with Maple Soul 7, one of their most personal and deep albums to date, with so much planned and to celebrate. It was in the middle of their promotions and performing at the music shows where the effects of the pandemic was already being felt, and then the promotions of the album stopped, and then the postponement of the Maple Soul tour came, and then it was a cancellation of it. One of the most exciting and ambitious projects in BTS career. It must have been a stab in the heart for them. As you know, I've already talked about Maple Soul 7 on this channel with what it could have been, and the more I think about this album, the more I just think about the tumultuous journey it has been on, and I'm probably going to do another video on Maple Soul 7 one day. And then now knowing the context of that was supposed to be what Proof was, their last kind of like little, you know, last hurrah for a bit whilst they complete their military, so they would be back. They would all be back by their 10th anniversary, which we know what happened, and I don't want to dwell on that for too long. But basically looking at from that perspective, with the pandemic and with how Maple Soul 7 and all that plans happened, Jimin being angry and in pain is so understandable, and I wouldn't even blame him for even feeling any worse. Gave you all the money, gave you all my heart speaks to that even more. Jimin and the rest of the members poured all their passion and soul into this tour and the whole comeback, and the cost to even plan and produce the tour must have been a lot, only for it to not happen. Those damn days of the past are over to now is a sentiment I feel like we can all feel, hoping those days in lockdown are part of the past now. Even though you test me, even if you test me, even though you kill me, even if you stab me more, I don't care about you. Even those days seem like hell. Again, it's a repetition of even at the same. Jimin is just listing, even though you kick me and punch me down even more, you will never get the best of me. I think it's still interesting to read Face Off in the way as it adds to the rest of the album and creates a clear story motif. The obvious theme of drinking and wanting to forget is also set up here and is a consistent throughout this album, as it heralds the idea of escapism, which will be the main character in the next song. Face Off also feels like a revenge song, and I love it. It feels different to anything else Jimin has done so far, which is something I love about the whole album. It's different to Lie, Serendipity, Filter, Promise, Christmas Love, With You. There are moments and themes that share similarities, but it's still completely different to what Jimin has done before, and just shows how widespread his musical talent is, which is so fun to experience. Face Off perfectly starts the album by introducing the anger Jimin presents in the song, whether it be towards a certain person or situation. It introduces themes of escapism but also control. The energy Jimin is feeling is there, but he has to stifle it for now, evident with the repetition he's using and the use of effects on his voice and the layers used on his voice as well, and the slow parts of the song, to not lose himself completely yet. He is facing off with himself to figure out how to ignore all the bad times, even though it is a seemingly impossible task. Face Off is a perfect start to this journey, as it introduces this anger and uncomfortable and hard situation Jimin finds himself in, as we all did, and it brings up the ideas of escaping and wanting to just get away from this for a while. So he decides to escape. What's most interesting about Interlude Dive is that it is the second track of the album, when interludes are usually in the middle or in the second half of the album. This is deliberate and is either a way to separate Face Off and what it represents from the rest of the album, or it is a resting point for the listener and Jimin. It's a point where you need to feel and think inside the mind, which is why Interlude Dive seems to be a mixture of so many things. As many people have pointed out, Jimin uses his element from Yet to Come in Busan in the interlude, which is bittersweet, knowing that it would be their last time together as Seven for a while. Their final speeches weigh a lot more now and hold so much more meaning. Having this in the interlude makes it feel like a haze of memories, a look back at important points that suddenly come back to you whilst you're not quite in the right mind. The structure and mixing of these different elements reminds me of when you are on the border of being asleep and awake. You are conscious enough to be aware that you are alive in this world, but in the world of dreams when everything in your mind is happening at once. Random images, sounds, moments, and people play in your mind. They can repeat and some can be stuck in your head. For me, this happens with music and memories a lot. It's your mind sorting things out, but also making no sense in the moment. That's what Interlude Dive feels to me. Linking this to the lockdown, I think at many moments of the pandemic made time stop and made it also speed up quickly. Days kind of melted into one, and at points the time of the year became unclear. It was such a hit to the norm we all used to live in that it stopped time completely and let the mind go into itself and try to figure everything out. I remember sleeping a lot and resting at points of the day where I just didn't know what time it was. The pandemic fucks up my perception of time and still does to this day, where I just didn't know what time it was. I don't know what month we were in. Everything just seems so same but also so different that it messed up my routine and sense of like where we were, and I think having that kind of confuses the mind as well. And Dive just captures that poor state where everything and nothing was happening at the same time. We were diving into memories, familiar sounds and life around us just to make sense of this weird time we were all going through, and it can get overwhelming. You can easily drown in everything in your mind as there's nothing else to think about, and that's why the best way sometimes is to escape. Like Crazy was and still is the hardest for me to put my thoughts together and explain every detail in full. There are so many layers to this song to unpack and analyse. They intertwine so well because the production of the song is so clear and precise, and the music video has so much meaning and symbolism in it as well. Like Crazy is synth pop perfection, and the dark melancholy undertones accompany the song makes it meant to be played in a club, and as the music video adheres to as well. Like Crazy is also the perfect metaphor for escapism. Now this section is probably going to be the longest part, as Like Crazy is the main point of this album being the main title track, so I think it deserves to have a lot of time dedicated to it. The first thing we hear straight away is a background murmur of "Save me, don't you try to save me."
I think we could last forever.
Mixed with a dialogue inspired by the film Like Crazy, with Shelby Young and Joe Brogy being the voice actors for the lines.
I think we could last forever. I'm afraid that everything will disappear. Just trust me.
This sets up the desperation for escape and the cry for help in the song. Of course, the motif of "Save me, don't you try to save me" is repeated later in the song in a much louder and visceral way. The dialogue reaffirms themes of fear and desperation, a back and forth of "I think we could just last forever, I'm afraid everything will disappear, just trust me." A conversation discussing morality and fear of morality. A presence of a female and male voice is throughout both the song and music video. Not entirely hinting to something romantic or anything, but to represent two opposites at battle with each other. One wanting to be consumed by temptation and escape whatever is happening in life, whilst the other is trying to crawl back to reality, crying for help. It could be argued that the theory of the anima and animus could relate to this, suggesting that everyone has a feminine and masculine side. This isn't the first time this theory from Carl Jung has been explored in relation to BTS, with of course the Map of the Soul series, specifically Persona, having many allusions towards it. Obviously we know Carl Jung's Map of the Soul theory literally inspired the Map of the Soul series, and especially in the Persona era with Boy With Love, there was a lot of talk and theorising about whether the anima and animus had relation to it, so this is not the first time it's been brought up. The instrumental also starts off slow and mellow, like music from a club that you're waiting outside the line for. The afternoon glow of the guitar strings pulse the warmest, creating a sort of comfort to the song already. We then get Jimin's beautiful voice sliding in to finish the intro. Underlining it, the instrumental becomes slower with a drum beat every 4 beats to slow the tempo down.
She's saying, baby, 생각하지 마. There's not a bad thing here tonight.
It again makes you focus on the lyrics and relaxes you into the song even more to make you feel comfortable and familiar with the environment. Jimin says, She says, "Baby, don't think about it, there's not a bad thing here tonight," suggesting that the female presence established represents a temptation and theme of escapism. Therefore, the male presence, which could be Jimin himself, represents the want to get help and escape from this dreamlike state. Is it possible to want to escape escapism? Maybe that's another thing the song asks. Then it hits. "Watch me go," Jimin sings as we are blasted by a synth of all synths. The synth is the foundation of a song, bringing the influence of a bit of 70s disco, a bit of 80s synth pop, a perfect sound for a nightclub. The use of nightclub as an escapism is rather common as it gets a point across right away, a place where you can let loose and have fun with friends on a night out. Especially looking at the pandemic roots, like crazy is letting yourself get consumed by fantasies and dreams just to be back in the club, to be with people again, or just to be out normally. I'm sure during the lockdown many of us had moments when we just daydream or fantasize about the time when we could all socialise normally again and reminisce over the times as well. The atmosphere and ambiance of the synths in the song amplifies that feeling even more. You remember the situation so well, but it's not real enough to be comforting and fill that void of loneliness and lockdown. Alcohol is also mentioned a lot in the song as another form of escapism. Obviously, using alcohol as a form of escapism and euphoria opens up a darker layer to this song. Now, this is obviously more metaphorical reasoning rather than suggesting a real life event in Jimin's life affected this, because of course I have no idea, nor do I think he has any problems to do with alcohol. Rather that he is using it as a symbol for escaping and as a distraction. As well as that, alcohol is a large part of the clubbing experience. As the lyrics say, "Drenching myself all night" sounds overwhelming and doing it for the sake of distraction rather than for pleasure. A similar phrase in Korean to drenching is to become or make someone wet, which is also slang for drinking, which is a fun bit of wordplay but also feeds into the theme of drinking even more. It also relates to the interlude dive and the feeling of being lost as well. The synth continues to be present but still low, not taking over just yet as the night is still young. Jimin's voice and the lyrics are the most important at this point, establishing the themes of drinking and clubbing, linking to escaping and wanting to be free, as well as pointing to the darker themes of loneliness. In the music video, we see Jimin get pulled by a stranger from his room into a club without seeing him want or do it on his own, suggesting how strong of a control the temptation has over him and how he's already fallen into his own fantasies. Use of a thermal camera effect flashing for a second when he gets pulled into a club separates the reality from the dream. The lack of privacy and intrusiveness indicates that Jimin is being his most vulnerable whilst in his escapist fantasies, as the pandemic both figuratively and literally closed people off from one another. Jimin is also dressed in a dark blue denim jacket and jean combination with a white net top underneath, the dark blue symbolising the theme of water, linking to the imagery of drenching, drowning and being overwhelmed. But the contrast between a tough dark denim jacket upon a revealing white see-through top is almost a metaphor in itself. Jimin opening up more in this music as he escapes to the nightclub in his fantasies. His inky midnight hair also dances perfectly with the blue and white lights in the club, and then is contrasted with his face coming to a more natural lighting, suggesting that he has now got more control and understands his surroundings. The music video then switches up with the melody and the tone Jimin sings in. A montage of Jimin drinking, playing games and having fun with friends over lyrics. "In the loud music I get faded out, a cliche story like drama, I get used to it." Basically describing the conventions of clubbing and how he settles with it. He loses himself to the music and has fun with friends. It's cliche but he's used to it. The fleeting shots of him smiling and drinking with friends imitates fleeting memories from nights out, but you can only remember certain parts but not for a full picture. The constant shots of Jimin looking like he's floating suggests he has the power and he's in control. The low camera angles looking up towards him also emphasise that. Then we're hit by the iconic "I'd rather be lost in the light."
I'd rather be lost in the light, lost in the light,
which is full of desperation again. Jimin is now covered in a warm glow, running through and into people like he's running away from something. It seems that when he's covered in blue lighting, he's reminiscing and completely submerged in his fantasy, but when he's covered in a natural warm lighting, he is part of reality again and facing his loneliness because of the pandemic. There's also lots of shots when he's also on the floor, losing that height and that power to be at his lowest as well as being alone, switching through escaping in his fantasy and facing the loneliness of real life. The contrast between screen, the camera panning out and spinning whilst Jimin stands in the hallway with this black liquid pouring out the sides, to him being the only focus in the crowd of blurry dancers, suggests that despite displaying opposite feelings in both scenarios, he is still drowning and losing the control. The black liquid pouring around him and the sea of people dancing are trying to drown out anything that stops his escapism, but we can already tell that it's not working, or at least it's having a worse effect on him. Thermal effects is then back, not focusing on Jimin, but everyone else around him dancing on their phones and two heterosexuals kissing, again making it feel intrusive and intimate. You spin me up high, the moon with you up in its arms. The metaphors and are littered among the song, and the use of you has been the main focus on this song so far. The you Jimin is referring to could be anything. The female voice and the present, already established, are a personified version of the temptation. The imagery of being up high is an obvious metaphor for Jimin being away from reality, quite literally being the opposite of being grounded in reality. The contrast between give me a good ride, it's gonna be a good night, and the I'm falling in the background is Jimin fighting with himself, giving into the temptation to escape real life, versus a cry for desperation and for help. Being in the lockdown, whether you're on your own or with people, can still be isolating and confusing. There are moments you may find peace and find a routine, but also moments when you have no idea what to do and your mind is against you, so you try to escape through memories or fantasies to try and have a taste of life before. The instrumental kicks in and takes over completely. It's like Jimin lets a synth melody do the talking whilst he still controls it by dancing in the blue lights of the club. A true moment of freedom and losing yourself to the music. Okay, I know I wasn't planning to really review this that much, but I just can't ignore when the song just dives into the instrumental even more and the synth just takes over with repeating crescendos and decrescendos. It's what pushed the song to being just amazing to absolute perfection. It adds the atmosphere of a late night at the club, and it just tears into your soul and mind and places you there as well. So for Like Crazy to go beyond and to give so much love to its production just makes me so happy. The second verse is short and sweet before jumping back into the pre-chorus. Jimin speaks about himself directly here, now in the bathroom of the club with the warm tan glow upon him, placing him in a more natural and realistic setting. It's the pauses between the clubbing when you're either outside or in the bathroom, when you can take a breather and just come back from reality. The me reflected in the mirror is going crazy endlessly, is Jimin realising or admitting that these fantasies and use of escapism is only temporary, to stop the insanity of not knowing what to do whilst being stuck inside and going crazy trying to figure out a way to adapt, a way to normal life again. It continues into the same pre-chorus and chorus, changing from the warm natural setting to the iridescent blues of the club again. The thermal camera is back this time with a close-up shot of people making out, furthering the intimate but intrusive theme, except this time Jimin is standing on top of them like he has the control now. He is not being pushed and pulled everywhere anymore, but there's still an underlying darkness and desperation for something. Perhaps that this fantasy is not helping him at all. The most poignant part here has to be Jimin's full on desperation and this will break me, this is gonna break me, oh don't you wake me, I want to stay in this dream, don't save me, don't you try to save me. It's heartbreaking to hear these lyrics as he's fighting himself again. As meant the line don't save me, don't you try to save me is repeated here, making the cry for help come full circle, for at first it was drowned out by the other dialogue and the instrumental, but now it's being sung out loud. This could mean feeling so isolated or doubting that anyone would want to help you or save you, or feeling so alive and thriving that you just don't need help nor any interference with your happiness. But this will break me, this is gonna break me kind of contradicts that, suggesting that this escapist fantasy, knowing it's not real, is going to break him, so then why wouldn't he want to be saving? Like Crazy is a roller coaster of emotions, conflicting between the state of euphoria and the state of isolation, figuring out what is real or not, but also the best place for your mind to run. It all culminates into the last chorus where Jimin's emotions finally burst through, indicating him being happy where he is at, but also seemingly it being a cry for help. It's confusing, and these emotions and situation aren't resolved by the end of the song. The song ends in a similar way how it starts, with the mellow but more drowned out don't save me, don't you try to save me, and the dialogue back again. This time only the male voice is heard, saying, alone again, what's the point? Clearly representing Jimin's perspective as he comes out of his escapist fantasy and back into the real world. I know this is long, but there's still so much I could talk about with this song, with it being the beating heart of the album. The synergy between the lyrics, music and visuals of the music video create an elaborate experience of trying to cope whilst in lockdown, or that's what I read it as. It being in the middle of the album is almost like the rise of the main point of tension in the story. Like Crazy is a confession to losing yourself, yourself, to your fantasies and memories of what was, trying to find some resemblance of humanity when you feel there's none around you. Ending with a dialogue, alone again, with the music video ending with Jimin back in his kitchen, now with a muddy hand, established that what just happened was in his head and now he's waking up to real life again. What's the point? Evokes a feeling of being stuck and not knowing what to do, as there is nothing you can do. You can't go out, see friends, be yourself the way you want to be and live the life you know you were meant to live. Jimin with Like Crazy captures something I truly felt during the pandemic, and that I feel every time February, March comes around each year now, and that's mourning a life that once was, a mourning life that could have been. Alone is the song on here that speaks for itself the most. From the title alone, you know what you're getting into. A melancholy R&B pop ballad tackling the struggles of being alone in the pandemic. This feels really like Jimin talking about his experiences personally in the pandemic, as the lyrics are the most raw and real, being upfront about his mental health and well-being and allowing himself to open up about it. Jimin also uses his lower register a lot to give this song an unusually calm and warm feeling despite the dark subtext, like he's trying to comfort himself and the audience despite the hardships he sings about. Alone also makes great use of Jimin's voice as an instrument, with the layering of his songs in the chorus being with his vocals being drowned out at the end of each line. It's a song where you can feel someone at the end of their tether and one more hit from being irreversibly broken. Soft piano notes open the song, followed by a simple alarm going off. It's a mundane sound that is present in most people's daily lives, but it can also be a symbol of an unwanted repeated cycle, especially when you are stuck in a slump or in a period of depression. The lyrics start with, "Since when it has been that I feel scared by everyone smiling in front of me. Though I try to run away, the me of now has lost the way." Is Jimin telling us that he has started to lose his way due to this weird routine lockdown has sent him into. It's like Jimin has stopped running to his way of escaping, as established in Like Crazy, and has come to the realization that it is not going to be enough anymore and that it wasn't helping. What struck me was, why am I the only one like this? No, everyone is like this, and I find him pathetic, as it was this honesty that hit me like a truck, as it put into words thoughts I had personally as well. I find him pathetic is Jimin talking about, I guess, himself, putting on a facade to pretend he's happy. The bluntness and harshness of the statement towards him is a gut punch, as you never want to hear someone you love or admire or care for speaking about themselves like that. But it represents the frustrations Jimin felt during the lockdown period, so it's so important to listen to and understand. The pre-chorus and chorus is when the repetition comes into play, as they are the only parts of the song that gets repeated again. It's also when Jimin's vocal layers come through, emphasising how many times he's had these thoughts, like they're a daily routine. He wakes up, it's the same day of doing nothing, which goes by yet again, asking how much longer do I have to endure this? It sounds like a torturous Groundhog's Day, but the numbness has made it feel like the new normal now. Cold and Lonely Night heightens the harsh conditions and feeling, as well as cold and lonely are simple adjectives. They are instantly universally understood and create sensory imagery that the audience will understand. Cold and lonely are often associated with colour blue as well, which brings back that motif. Mindlessly alone, I pace my room with the lights turned off. He's not even living at the point, he's just surviving. Though I used to say it's okay, I feel like I'm gradually losing myself. Parallels the me who pretends to be okay every time. I find him pathetic, emphasising how each day is another day of spiralling. Day and night, the repeated fall, bad twilight, though I try to look away. Day and night, the repeated fall, make it right, it's going to be alright. Feels so heavy, both metaphorically but also how Jimin sings it. It feels heavy on his throat with the way he emphasises each word when he sings. The repeated fall is always dragged down at the end, like each day Jimin has to carry around these heavy weights, and a repeated fall sounds like he just spirals down to the worst place he could be. I couldn't imagine how hard it was for him and the other members when they had to stop everything they loved doing. I mean, obviously for everyone it could be hard, but obviously with all these grandiose plans they had for the Map of the Soul 7 tour vanishing into thin air because of the pandemic, all this hard work that they probably spent the latter half of 2019 working on and dedicating so much time, all fell to pieces like that. We all know how much BTS love touring and performing together, so for the biggest tour ever, probably, with their most grandiose and spectacular staging and theming, all that just did not happen. It was never really completed, and I couldn't imagine how destroying that could be. The chorus ending with a childlike chant repeating "live" feels ironic. Taunting yourself by saying you're alive for pretending to be okay when you're not is awful. It cuts even deeper, especially when one of the most obvious connections to make with this is to his solo song from Wings, which is also called Lie. As we know how personal the message in that song is. Alone is probably one of the darkest songs I think any BTS member has ever made, I'm not gonna lie. The last bit I want to talk about is the last verse before the same pre-chorus and chorus. Again, it's that same repetition and like crazy, when the main points are repeated at the start at the end, and it's just a repetition, kind of mirroring the repetition of daily life in a lockdown where everything just keeps the same but nothing gets better. Even if you try to make believable excuses, even if you try to close your eyes and turn away, you know it's already broken, that it can't be reversed. This lyric is just another gut punch after gut punch, and again, it just doesn't feel like it's getting easier. However, it could be seen as some form of acceptance with the last line, knowing that the life you used to have is now broken and you cannot reverse it. Whilst it is the bitter truth, it's the realisation of those harsh realities that allows people to accept life for what it is and then start having the motivation to move forward. Despite its depressing subject, this part of Alone gives a little bit of hope for the future. The song ends with a chanting of Lie again, sounding like a laugh as the instrumental fades into a deep bass riff like you've just hit rock bottom. But once you hit rock bottom, there's only one way to go. Finally, we get to the song that started this comeback off, Set Me Free Part 2. This is where the epiphany hits Jimin and has broken out of that slump and back into who he is. This time just more hungry and rejuvenated than ever. So what better song to represent that than a massive power anthem full of intense choreography, showing the best of Park Jimin. The title is obviously about Jimin being free, but the Part 2 edition is interesting as it refers not to one of his past songs, but to August's interlude Set Me Free on his D2 album. Despite this song celebrating Jimin being finally free again after so long, it doesn't shy away from mentioning the struggles he went through as told in the previous songs. There's references to him feeling lost with the line "I wandered in a maze," with drinking to the Hennessy and Night line, repetition of "I never stop," as well as saying how he's proud to be open with his emotions and channel them through performing. Fly Away Butterfly, finally free. Feels like a burst of emotions, but this time full of hope and joy, finally knowing the purpose of living again. Set Me Free Part 2 is a perfect ending to the journey started in Face Off. I raised a fist for the past me, now set me free. It's so powerful, uplifting, and also not being ashamed of when he was at his lowest and setting that part of him free so he is able to thrive. It is simple, it's clear, and it's powerful. There are also some references in the lyrics to the lyrics of On. Going insane to remain sane could reference to remain sane one must go insane, and gladly I ride on, bring the pain on, in On as well. Again, I want to thank Dulcet Bangtan for providing these translations as well as its context, because I would have never got that at all. The parallels between On and Set Me Free being a motivational power ride to keep on going after facing adversity and the lowest points of life makes sense. What makes it more harrowing is that what Jimin is finally free from in Set Me Free Part 2 is the situation right after On had released, with the lockdown starting Korea during promotions of On and Map of the Soul 7, and then the whole world locking down when the Map of the Soul 7 tour was supposed to start. Set Me Free Part 2 is almost an extension of On, giving back and honouring an era that was lost to unforeseen circumstances. And whether it was meant that way or subconsciously, It's Jimin's way of ending that era off in his own way, completing something that was never complete. Of course, the music video is a spectacle, and I love how they keep it focused on the choreography and focus on Jimin's spectacular skills as a dancer, as well as the other dancers around him. Again, the formation of the dancers being like a band. The Set Me Free Part 2 music video really reminds me of the Kinetic Manifesto music video for On with the choreography, so the parallels keep stacking up. The way Jimin commands the other dancers makes him feel like a deity among them, all dressed up in black. It's like he's still in mourning but with a new lease on life and is in the process of moving on. Set Me Free Part 2 somehow balances both anger and euphoria, and it works beautifully together. Set Me Free Part 2 is a perfect closer for the album. It's full of honesty and bite, anger and joy, power and control. Jimin is now where he needs to be, and despite all the hardships he went through in Face Off, Interlude, Dive, Like Crazy and Alone, he still carries them and wears them on his sleeve openly. There is no shame acknowledging hardships you have went through, especially when it felt like you were suffering alone. But Set Me Free Part 2 gives so much hope and insight to Jimin as an artist, a performer and a person. I truly cannot think of a better person to capture all these emotions and experiences in a short but cohesive and well-produced album. The story of Face is harrowing and depressing, full of heartbreak and feeling numb, but witnessing the journey Jimin displayed, allowing us to feel what he felt as well as letting us relate, makes the celebration of Set Me Free Part 2 that much more rewarding. The lockdowns and the pandemic were the worst times, let's be honest, it was. Thank God it's over. We made it, and I'm proud of all of us. I don't really know how to end this video, as it will probably be one of the most personal and emotionally charged ones. There is so much more I could say and talk about, and many more revelations I will probably have in the future about this album, but I do feel satisfied with where I've ended my message, I guess. I know there's also the Like Crazy English version as well as a hidden track Letter, but I just feel that they weren't meant to be part of the full story. Like Crazy is just Like Crazy with English lyrics, and whilst those lyrics can add more meaning, I feel that the OG version does enough justice. And Letter is a beautiful fan song that is a surprise on the physical album and feels more like an epilogue or aftermath to this journey. Out of all of this, I'm glad Jimin has armies to make him feel loved and cared for, and to know that so many people around the world loves all the work he does. Letter is such a beautiful song as well, and it was just such an amazing surprise to have. I might be back soon with another video, but depending on how long this takes to edit, who knows. But if you made it to end, really, thank you for watching, and I really do appreciate it.